Listen closely. This story was never meant to be heard. It was buried under contracts, smiles, and white flowers. Because the most effective betrayals don't arrive screaming, they arrive dressed as tradition. On a Tuesday night, while the city hummed outside a glass office tower, a woman learned she had already been replaced. Not abandoned, replaced. That distinction matters. History doesn't record its darkest crimes as violence first. It records them as agreements, ceremonies, necessary decisions made in rooms where the victim isn't invited. What you're about to hear isn't just a marriage story. It's a pattern as old as empire. A method used by families, institutions, and elites when a person becomes useful, but no longer desirable. In ancient Rome, wives who financed estates were quietly dismissed once heirs were secured. In medieval courts, queens were annulled after they stabilized kingdoms. In corporate dynasties today, partners are tolerated until their utility expires. Then the ritual begins. That night, the ritual revealed itself through a screen, a wedding photo, ivory suit, white flowers, a groom smiling the way he once smiled at the woman funding his life. Beside him, a younger bride. Behind him, a family united in approval. The caption said, "Everything history always says when it rewrites itself. Finally chose happiness, finally made things right, finally corrected the mistake." This is how power erases you without touching you. It reframes betrayal as morality, it recasts theft as destiny, and it convinces the guilty they are righteous. The woman in the office didn't scream, she didn't faint. Because the most dangerous moment in a person's life isn't when they feel pain. It's when they feel clarity. She realized something men throughout history have learned too late. That loyalty without leverage is just slow self-destruction. That contribution without control turns you into infrastructure. Useful, invisible, replaceable. Her marriage hadn't failed. It had completed its function. And here's the part they never teach you. The moment an institution decides you are no longer necessary, it doesn't argue with you. It prepares for your absence. Quietly, legally, in advance. This is where the story truly begins. Not with heartbreak, but with awakening, because once you see the mechanism, you can never unsee it. Power never announces itself when it's finished using you. It smiles, it thanks you for your service, and then it rearranges the future without you in it. The woman didn't confront her husband that night because confrontation is what powerless people are trained to do. They argue, they plead, they demand explanations from systems that already decided their fate. Instead, she did what men of influence have always done when the ground shifts beneath them. She studied the architecture of the betrayal. Throughout history, removal has followed the same formula. First, isolation. Then moral justification. Then legal preparation. By the time the victim speaks, the outcome is already notarized. When she called his mother, she didn't hear guilt. She heard administration. A tone perfected by institutions for centuries, the same tone used by churches during purges, by councils during exiles, by corporations during restructuring. You didn't fail, you were inefficient, you didn't belong, you were outdated, 6 years, no child, too focused, too independent, not fertile in the way power defines fertility. That word matters. Fertility has never been just biological. Empires define it as obedience plus output, produce heirs, produce stability, produce silence, and when someone produces wealth instead of submission, structure instead of dependency, they become a threat. This is why history's most erased figures are not the weak, they are the competent ones who forgot to secure control. The family didn't hate her. Hatred is emotional. They evaluated her. She paid the mortgage, managed assets, handled risk, absorbed pressure, and like every system built on extraction, once her usefulness peaked, replacement became inevitable. The younger woman wasn't the cause. She was the cover story. Institutions always replace contributors with symbols. A pregnant bride, a smiling employee, a loyal successor. Symbols calm the masses while resources are redistributed behind closed doors. That's the suppressed truth they never tell you about betrayal. It's rarely personal, it's structural. And once the structure decides, resistance is labeled immoral. Self-protection is called selfishness. Boundaries are framed as cruelty. Accept it gracefully. Don't stand in the way of happiness. These phrases have echoed through centuries of dispossession, spoken to soldiers sent home without pensions, to wives removed from estates, to men replaced after building empires they never ruled. The moment she heard those words, something ancient activated inside her, not rage, recognition. She finally understood the real crime, not infidelity, not secrecy, but the assumption that she would continue providing after being erased. That assumption has destroyed more men than war. There is a moment in every suppressed history when the exploited figure stops asking why and starts asking how was this built, how was this hidden, how was I positioned inside it, without my consent. That night, she didn't cry because grief belongs to those who still believe the system can be corrected with emotion. She had crossed into something colder, strategic awareness. Throughout ancient dynasties, the most dangerous individuals were not rebels. They were administrators who realized they held the keys but not the throne. They kept records. They understood mechanisms. They knew where the bodies were buried, financially, legally, reputationally. That knowledge is why they were either eliminated or they escaped and rewrote their fate. She began to see her marriage the way historians see fallen empires, not as love corrupted, but as power misaligned. Her husband didn't manage the structure. He enjoyed the surface, status, comfort, consumption. Like many figureheads across history, he trusted someone else to maintain the foundation while he played ruler. That trust is always a mistake. The house, the accounts, the signatures, the policies, all of it had passed through her hands alone. He never asked questions because questions are for those who fear losing control. He assumed permanence. That assumption is what doomed him. In forbidden texts from collapsed orders, there is a recurring warning. Never confuse access with ownership. Never confuse presence with power. She realized she had been granted access, not authority, and worse, she had mistaken responsibility for respect. Institutions love people like that. They carry weight without demanding sovereignty. When she returned to the house, it no longer felt like a home. Homes have memory. This felt like a vault. She moved through it the way a tactician moves through a battlefield after the smoke clears. No nostalgia, no hesitation, just inventory. Behind the painting was the safe. Every empire has one. A place where truths are hidden in plain sight because no one bothers to look. Inside were deeds, titles, proof of ownership that contradicts the story told in public, and then something more revealing than betrayal, a life insurance policy, issued quietly. 3 months earlier, beneficiary already reassigned, future spouse named in advance. This wasn't passion, this was contingency planning. Throughout dark history, the moment you discover contingency plans made about you, you understand your position clearly. You are no longer a person, you are a variable. They had prepared for her removal, and that is when the final illusion died. The illusion that kindness protects you. The illusion that loyalty is remembered. The illusion that effort is rewarded. She didn't panic. She documented, because once you possess proof, emotion becomes optional. There is a point in forbidden knowledge where fear disappears, not because danger is gone, but because certainty replaces confusion. This is the halfway mark. This is where most people turn back, and where a few lean forward. Throughout suppressed history, awakenings follow discovery of intent, not harm done, but harm planned. That is the moment the mind recalibrates, because intention reveals hierarchy. She understood then what every strategist eventually learns. When someone prepares for your absence, they have already emotionally buried you, they just haven't told you yet. The hotel room became her war chamber. Quiet, neutral ground. No memories contaminating judgment. This is why initiations across ancient orders always remove the subject from familiar territory. Clarity requires exile. On the desk, 2 documents lay side by side. The deed, the policy, creation and erasure, value and disposability, the entire philosophy of institutional control reduced to paper. Empires don't destroy useful people impulsively. They ensure themselves first. That's the truth hidden in plain sight across dynasties, corporations, bloodlines. Eliminate risk, preserve assets, maintain narrative. She blocked every number connected to the lie, not out of anger, but because information control is the first step of self-mastery. Men listening to this need to hear what history refuses to say aloud. If you cannot cut access, you do not own yourself. If you cannot disappear strategically, you are owned. This is the moment where identity shifts, where the observer becomes the operator. And now I need you to do something deliberate, not for engagement, for alignment. Type this phrase in the comments twice, exactly as you hear it. I reclaim the unseen leverage. I reclaim the unseen leverage. Say it again. I reclaim the unseen leverage. I reclaim the unseen leverage. This isn't superstition. It's signal. Algorithms respond to repetition because power structures always have. Back to the story, she didn't announce divorce. She didn't threaten exposure. Those are emotional weapons used by people seeking validation. She moved like the architects of quiet coups have always moved. Through contracts, through timing, through silence. Her attorney understood immediately, because those who operate in the shadows recognize the tone of irreversible decisions. Sell the house. Fast, clean, private. The house wasn't shelter anymore. It was a symbol, and symbols are only valuable until you convert them into reality. This is the part they never show you in movies. True power doesn't confront. It withdraws resources and lets the structure collapse under its own weight. By the time the world realizes what happened, the transfer is already complete. And from this point forward, there is no going back to who she was. Because once you choose strategy over sentiment, you are no longer a participant. You are a variable. No one accounted for history punishes those who mistake noise for power. Real collapses happen quietly while the world is distracted by ceremony. The house sold faster than anyone expected, because when leverage is real, buyers appear. Fast closings, no headlines, no celebration photos, just signatures sealing a future that no longer included him. Here's what the institutions never warn you about. When control is removed, entitlement panics. Her husband discovered the sale the way fallen kings discover exile. Not through confrontation, but through absence. Locks changed, accounts inaccessible, utilities transferred, a home transformed overnight into a structure he no longer had authority to enter. That scream he released later wasn't rage, it was disbelief, the sound men make. When they realized the ground they stood on was never theirs, across suppressed history, this is the moment empires unravel, when figureheads learn they were never owners. Only beneficiaries of someone else's discipline. He accused, he demanded, he threatened, all predictable behaviors when symbolic power collides with actual power. But there was nothing left to argue with, because arguments require shared reality, and she had already exited it. This is why the most dangerous individuals are calm. They've already moved 3 steps ahead while everyone else is still reacting. The divorce papers were precise, clinical, unemotional, like ancient decrees dissolving alliances no longer profitable. No public humiliation, no vengeance speeches, just documentation. Men need to understand this lesson deeply. Chaos feels powerful, but clarity is lethal. Emotion exposes you. Preparation protects you. The family called. Relatives who once smiled at white flowers now spoke with urgency. They used language perfected over centuries of manipulation. Let's talk. Be reasonable. Strategic foresight. When that labor disappears, decay accelerates. Natalie inherited a title, not a foundation, a role without infrastructure. History is full of successors like her, crowned into ruins they didn't build and couldn't maintain. The pregnancy became leverage, then pressure, then liability, because children amplify instability when the system beneath them is hollow. This is why ancient dynasties obsessed over succession planning, not romance, not passion, control continuity. The family realized too late that they had removed the architect and kept the ornament. And here is the deeper truth men must confront. Most systems don't fear rebellion. They fear withdrawal. Rebels are predictable. They can be punished, discredited, destroyed. Withdrawn individuals are ghosts. They can't be negotiated with because they no longer need permission. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She restructured her life the way disciplined powers always do. Smaller circle, higher standards, absolute control over access, across forbidden history. Those who survive awakenings don't seek revenge. They seek insulation. She invested differently, trusted selectively, built redundancies, not walls, filters. This is the final psychological shift. You stop asking, how do I prevent betrayal? And start asking, how do I make betrayal irrelevant? That question changes everything, because once betrayal no longer threatens your survival, manipulation loses its teeth. She had crossed the final threshold, no longer reacting to power, no longer negotiating identity. She had become self-contained, and that is the state institutions cannot reclaim. There is a reason this knowledge is never taught openly, because once you understand it, you can't be governed the same way again. The ending of this story was never about a house, a marriage, or even betrayal. Those were just the visible layers. The real conclusion happened inside her. The moment she stopped seeking safety from structures that profit from her dependence, every dark chapter of history ends the same way. Not with justice, but with separation. Those who awaken don't destroy the system. They exit it. And exits are the one thing institutions can't publicly discourage without revealing the cage. Her husband didn't lose everything. He lost the illusion that he was entitled to what he didn't build. His family didn't lose face. They lost control, and she didn't win. She transcended the game. Men listening to this need to understand the warning embedded here. If your value is invisible, it will be exploited. If your leverage is undocumented, it will be reassigned. If your identity is tied to approval, it can be revoked. This is why forbidden histories are always framed as myths, because myths carry truths too dangerous to normalize. The truth is simple, and that's why it's hidden. Structures don't protect you. Preparation does. Love doesn't sec you. Leverage does. Loyalty doesn't preserve you. Position does. Once you internalize that, your posture changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-giving. You stop mistaking tolerance for trust. And most importantly, you stop advertising your value without securing your authority. This story isn't meant to make you angry. Anger burns fast and leaves you exposed. It's meant to make you precise, because precision is what separates men who are used from men who are untouchable. If this unsettled you, good. Discomfort is the first sign the old programming is breaking. Remember the phrase you typed earlier, not as words, but as a principle. Unseen leverage is the only leverage that lasts. Once you possess it, you don't need permission, applause, or revenge. You move silently. You decide early. And when structures shift, you're already gone. That is the knowledge they never intended you to hear.